And everybody will say, "You call Mary?" She goes, "Yeah." He says, "Well, how do you know how to do it?" She goes, "I know what the boys are thinking."
Welcome to the Rich Outdoors, where we break down the tips, tactics, and strategies of hunting's greats to not only help you become better hunters, but to motivate and inspire you between hunting adventures. For more about us, including additional resources on our guests and links to everything we cover in the interview, check out therichoutdoors.net. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rich Outdoors. I'm your host, Cody Rich. And today's guest, Mr. Will Primos, really needs no introduction. I'm sure we all know who he is. The founder of Primos Game Calls is working on his 20th elk hunting DVD this year. I think it's safe to say with 19 elk hunting DVDs in the bank, he knows a thing or two about elk hunting. You know, we've all watched in awe over the years at the bulls he's chased. And Will's success, both in hunting and in business, is something that I truly admire. You know, his story is kind of the American dream. And through that success, he's been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time watching elk, learning from elk, you know, mastering the sounds and mastering the techniques for elk hunting. And in this episode, we chat about everything from elk and elk hunting tactics, but we also talk about some industry direction and great life lessons. One of the things that I've tried to draw out of hunting and from the guests that I have on the show is the life lessons that hunting can teach you. Hunting has the ability to really make us better, you know, to strive to be in better shape, to teach us patience, humility, and even compassion, you know, and I love chatting with hunters who have been around and have some real life experience. And Will Primos is no exception. You know, the guy is very intelligent. He's been around. He's built one of the most successful businesses. He's been on more elk hunts than I could ever dream, I'm sure. And I found that those type of interviews or those type of conversations have more to share than just what brand of bow I should be using this year. Anyway, I hope you guys pull something out of this conversation with Mr. Will Primos on elk hunting and success. And at a minimum, I hope this gets you pumped and excited for elk season, because just hearing some of Will's stories gets me really excited to be chasing elk here before we know it. Before we get started, though, I want to give a 5-star shout out to, and I'm going to butcher this name, my apologies, but I want to give a 5-star shout out to Bob Thenis. I'm going to guess. Sorry, Bob, if I totally butchered that name. Bob writes, "Great hunting podcast, 5 stars. This is a great hunting podcast with a great variety of guests and interests. Keep the great guests and information coming." Well, thanks, Bob, for the kind words. And for that, we're hooking you up with a hunter specialty BioStrike kit. It's the whole kit of scent elimination from Hunter Specialties. So shoot me an email, cody@therichoutdoors.net, and we'll get you hooked up with your whole scent system. We got more to give away. You know, the guys from Primos hooked us up with a whole package of goodies. So we're going to do another giveaway next week. I got a signed copy. Will went ahead and signed the newest elk hunting DVD. They hooked us up with a whole pack of calls and bugles, reeds, everything. The open reed cow calls, and a couple hats. So I got a whole package of that. So I'm going to do another giveaway for a 5-star review next week. So get over to iTunes, leave us a review. We appreciate it. It helps out, and win some Primos gear. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy this interview, and be sure to let us know what you think. Thanks, guys. Well, hey, Will, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you on, good sir.
Well, thank you, Cody. It's always fun to talk about elk and elk hunting, and I know everybody's thinking about it because this is end of June, fixing to be July. Can't believe half the year's gone, and come end of August, 1st September, a lot of us are headed out there, and we get to be there as elk make their transformation from a sweet, nice, docile little critter to a deadgum dragon.
You know, one of the upsides is every year that goes by, it seems that the time between elk seasons gets shorter and shorter, but it also feels like elk season comes and goes so fast anymore that I hardly blink and it's over.
It does. I think you're right. I think I don't think it's a misconception. It comes so fast and goes so fast. It does just that.
So I guess we'll start out. I'm always curious about people's first elk hunts, or maybe the elk hunt that just kind of sealed the fate as an elk hunter. You have a first elk hunt you remember, or a favorite elk hunt that really sealed the deal and got you hooked?
Well, I guess it wasn't necessarily a hunt; it was a sighting. I'm from Mississippi, of all places. My family has a Greek heritage. My granddaddy, on my father's father, came over from Greece in 1908 at 8 years old, and immigrated in through New Orleans with his mother. The Turks had killed his daddy. And so 5 siblings and my great-grandmother came over there, and he entered into the restaurant business. And because he didn't have an education, couldn't speak English, and all he could do was bust tables or help bake bread or whatever. But he was smart and industrious, and he figured it out and became very, very successful. And right before the Depression, he moved to the capital of Mississippi, which was Jackson, and ended up a very successful businessman. He died in 1979 at 79 years old. But we lived on 52 acres that was outside of Jackson. We had donkeys and horses and chickens and sheep and lakes and places to hunt and rabbits and squirrels. And so I just grew up in that world. And we didn't have but 2 TV stations, weren't allowed to watch but 30 minutes a day. And we were told to go outside and play. So we had hay forts, and we rode horses bareback. We swam the river with horses on bareback. We played cowboys and Indians, and that was my growing up. Very sheltered, fun, outdoor world. But I loved to hunt and fish. And when I was 15, my mother and my aunt decided to take the 2 families without the fathers, because they were working, to Estes Park, Colorado. And we flew on what was called Braniff Airlines to Denver. And Braniff had the prettiest stewardesses in the world. I was 15 years old. Every seat was a different pattern of beautiful colors. I remember that. And so it was illegal to fish in Estes Park. So I snuck the end of a fly rod tip in my pants leg as we went hiking. And I had bought my little salmon eggs, whatever they were, little fish eggs, whatever you fish with. And I built a rock fort, and I filled that thing up with fish. And while I was doing it, I heard something, and I turned around, and there was a mule deer. And then I went hiking to find some beaver dammed up spots to fish in. And I saw elk. And I went, oh, this is the ticket. I'm going to come back and do this. So that was what really got me interested in the West at that age, at 15. So it wasn't a hunt; it was a sighting.
Wow! So was the West always something that kind of drew you out, and that whole adventure? I mean, growing up in the South, you kind of did a lot of hunting and did a lot of that. What was the West to you when you were growing up?
Well, it was a different season, it was a different time, and it was a faraway land. And as life got going after 15. I mean, you're getting through high school, you're going to college. I didn't go straight to college. I joined the Air Force and was a marksmanship instructor in the Air Force. I trained the pilots and co-pilots who were going to Vietnam and stuff like that, to how to defend themselves with 45 automatic pistols, 38s, M16s, M16 grenade launchers, and we did a lot of practice with M1 Garands. With the Garand, and so that the 30-06, and that was an incredible experience, being at Lackland Air Force Base and doing all that. But life just got away, I then went to college and graduated in 1974 from a school in Jackson, Mississippi. It was a Presbyterian private school that I went to because I could go to that school and work. I had skeet shooting hobbies, and it was expensive, and I was always doing something that cost a lot of money, buying fishing rods, buying guns, shooting skeet, all that kind of buying 4-wheel drive trucks. So I worked for my family in the restaurant business. So it wasn't until 1988 that I got back. Now I got to do the math. I was born in 52. How old was I in 88? I was in my 30s. So I wasn't until then that I got back to get to go elk hunting. And I went to Yampa, Colorado, and had access to some BLM land, and just tried my heart out, and finally got an elk to come to me. And I made a poor shot. I learned a lot about myself, and I didn't find the elk till several days later. And a bear had found him, and he had made good use of him. But I still have those antlers today. It was just a small 5-point. So that was my first trip back. But just the exhilaration, the hiking, the climbing, the figuring it out, the lay of the land. I mean, you think you're looking at what's the top of the mountain, and the only reason that's not the top of the mountain because it was hiding the mountain that was behind it. And there's another world down in the valley over there. So it was just to intrigue the living daylights out of me. And I was in the call business. I started the call business in 76, primarily making turkey calls, deer calls, and I had started making some elk calls. I didn't know much about it. I had a lot to learn, but I was determined to spend my time. So I spent 2 to 6 weeks every year in the elk woods, studying them, learning them. I'd go back in the summer and study them and learn them, learn what I could. I heard cows bugle. I heard all kind of sounds in the summer. So I learned a lot about the language and about what calls could produce the sound. But 88 was my first real adventure, and then I began to really figure out how to do this. And we finally got pretty good at it.
Yeah, it takes some time to become an expert elk hunter, and I don't know if anyone ever really does. I think they just get luckier over time. But, how was the development of elk calls? You had this giant a call company, and you focused so hard on the quality and making the most realistic sounds that any call could do. And how was that development, with learning this new language, this new species, and as you grew, the Primos call lines?
Well, for me, I didn't know it all, and I knew that. And there were people who were older, who had been hunting elk a lot longer, who had experienced it. And so I would pick anybody's brain, and I would digest it and decide if something made sense or something didn't make sense. I mean, there's stalking elk in their beds. There's calling elk up. There's hunting public land. There's hunting highly managed land where they have a very limited amount of bulls that they take, so that you got quality and you got a lot of elk and a lot of opportunities. There's all different type of elk hunting situations, and I've been in all of those. I've drawn public land and hunted those in more recent years because of time frame. We've accessed high quality ranches that allow us to have a lot of opportunity because we want to get as much video footage as we can, and we don't try to fake anything. It is what it is. Sometimes we've got a camera mounted on a tree next to us, a little GoPro camera now, and a camera behind us with somebody who's also there hunting. They're part of the deal. But for me, as I began to pick other brains and listen and pay attention, and I'd made some calls, and I just felt like they just didn't measure up. That was in the early 90s. And in 1994, I was at a show in Michigan, and there was a lot of people there with their little booths, and it was a big dealer had a big showing with all his people who sold products in his store had booths, and they let me come, and I had my little booth, and I'm hearing these elk sounds across the way with all the noise and people talking, and I'm going, holy dadgummit, that sounds really good. So I got a break, and I went over there and I found that booth, and there was this guy there, and I met him. His name was Rocky Jacobson, and I said, man, I tell you what. Those sounds you're making are incredible. How you doing that? And I said, before you answer that, I'm in the call business. I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to really make a step more so into the elk market with better products. So just want to let you know that up front. And we hit it off and enjoyed working with Rocky. And one thing led to another. And he had a patent application. And we bought his patent application and refiled some claims on it and beefed it up. But I picked Rocky's brain. And he had made what was called a palate plate call. It was a mouth call. And it was far superior to anything that had been done before. Rocky invented that, created it. And he also, I learned a lot about sound making. For turkey sounds, a mouth call is one thing. For elk, it's another. You're trying to clean things up. An elk sound for a cow or a bull, it's a sliding note. It's a high to a low sliding note, and it doesn't break. Like a turkey, you want it to break and have rasp, and you don't necessarily want that with an elk call unless you're doing some real aggressive bugling or some display bugling and stuff like that, which is another whole subject. But at any rate, that really sent us in the right direction. And then we worked on our bugle, and we got that down, and we made the biggest problem. I would identify what are the problems with what's out there. And so for the bugle, it was people sold these bugles. You had a piece of latex. You stretched it over the call with rubber bands, and it was a trial and error deal. Latex is an organic material made from rubber. It would rot and wouldn't last very long. So I came up with silicone. I had seen a silicone membrane that was used for a turkey tube call, and I thought, So I adapted that, created a compression mold up in Wisconsin, and then began to control the thickness of that reed. And we mic every reed to be sure it's correct. And we reject probably 30% of them. But at any rate, that bugle became very successful. That first real successful bugle was the Terminator. But still, every bugle we've made to this day uses the same blue reed mouthpiece system, and that's what makes it so important. Backing up to the palate plate calls, early on when we got all that figured out, I was doing a seminar in Boise, Idaho. It was a big dealer there. And I forget the name of the dealer. The young guy owned it and ran it. His father had passed away, and he and his mother had taken over. And we had about 1,000 people in a big auditorium that had come out to see this Mississippi Southern redneck elk talk. And so they introduced me, and I got up there and had a lapel mic on, and I passed out a free mouth call to everybody there. Gave away over 1,000. And barely got started, and some guy was yelling from the back, and I said, "Yes, sir." And he was hollering, what do you know from Mississippi? What do you know about elk calling and elk hunting? And so not everybody could hear the question. So I repeated it with a microphone, lapel mic, so everybody could hear it. And I said, well, here's the only way I can answer that. In Mississippi, we used to have a lot of elk, but we killed them all. And now we're coming to Idaho. So that was kind of funny, and it broke the ice. And lo and behold, people began to see that, golly, this guy's thought about it, and he's figured out how to teach it. And so it was a lot of fun. And we realized then at that time that the size of your mouth, the shape of your mouth, the width of your teeth, the height of your palate makes a huge difference in whether you can successfully use a mouth call. So we began to make different sizes and shapes of mouth calls so that different people could access the great opportunity to use a mouth call, because having hands-free is just the ticket. So.
It's funny you say that, and the evolution of calls. I mean, it was not that long ago that we were blowing through a copper flute to bugle an elk, and to look at where we are today. What's your thoughts on the evolution of the equipment, but also how is the evolution of how we call and the animal's reaction to that changed throughout your career?
Well, I don't think it's changed as far as the animal goes. Everybody says, well, the elk are learning, they're figuring it out. Elk, like many animals, they just make a living. They make a living all day long, every day. It's all about their eyes, their ears, and their nose. And they're taking that information and figuring out what's danger and what's not. I don't believe that every time you call and an elk shows up and the elk sees you, he goes, oh, crud, that was a human making an elk sound. They think that there was another cow or elk or bull there, and they showed up, and here this predator already ran the other critter off. So, but they learned to associate coming to a call with danger. No different than they learn that if they go to bugling and carrying on and cow calling a lot, a grizzly bear is going to show up if they're in grizzly bear country, or a wolf's going to show up if they're in wolf country. So they learn to call softer, to bugle softer, or not at all. And they still will possibly come, but they'll work the wind more. There's all kind of adaptations that they can do. When we access ranches that are highly managed, have a great herd, and the elk don't really play the wind much. They come in, but if you hunt a heavily hunted area and you get into some elk, I've heard bulls mew so softly that I don't think a human being could hear it at 15 yards if he had good hearing. And I'm 64. I've lost a lot of hearing, especially in my left ear from shooting. It's called shooter's ear. I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you're going to lose your right ear first. So you have to make adaptations to where the elk are living. It's all about where they're living and the amount of pressure that they're under, either from other predators, wolves, grizzlies, or the ultimate predator, which is the human being.
So how do you think that'll change, going forward in years to come? Is calling going to be effective down the road, or is that something that elk will learn to avoid?
Elk will learn to avoid it in certain areas, and I think I was leading to a point. The elk that figured it out 10 years ago were probably dead. So, they figured out coming to a call. So the younger the bull, that's why the younger bulls, they don't have the experience. That's why they come quicker and come harder and are more excited or more stupid with the way they react to calling. And while the big bulls, the big herd bulls, they're paying a whole lot of attention to what the cows, especially the lead cow, is doing. And if you call and they leave and you hear that bull just bugling like crazy as he's leaving, more than likely he's following the herd because they left and the lead cow's taking them because she didn't like what you were doing and she wasn't going to risk whether you were a predator or not. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's going to change any more than it has now. I mean, the elk, they don't live that long, and new ones are being born every year, but they all adjust and they all adapt every year. So it's not like they have this great big huge brain like a human, and they can collect this information and continue to add to it and figure out whether it's a human being or not.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. They're just making a living. They're using their eyes, their ears, and their nose to make a living every day.
Oh yeah, and they get really good at it, by the way.
Yeah.
How is your tactics? A lot of times you're hunting, like you said, you're hunting a lot of private bulls, so a lot of guys think of that differently. But overall, how has your tactics changed with elk hunting? As you've kind of evolved as a hunter and things have changed, how have your tactics specifically changed over the years?
Well, after that 1988 experience, we'd have a cameraman. We were trying to video it so we could promote things and sell our calls and get people interested in the name Primos and learn to pronounce it. People say Primo, they say Primo, but it has an S on it and it's Primos. It's a form probably of something like Primbos, which was a Greek name. And when they came over from the boat, and landed in New Orleans, the immigration officer said, "Your name's Primos." And I'm sure my great-grandmother went, "Okay, that'd be fine." Well, she didn't say it in English because she couldn't speak English then, but she nodded, "Yes, that'd be fine." But at any rate, so as we began to do it, and we took a cameraman with us, so we're calling, and that elk comes, and I see him, and he's 75 yards, and he stops, and he stands there, and he looks, and he looks, and he looks. And I shut up because if I call, he's going to know exactly where it's coming from. Finally, he turns around, walks off, or he bugles once or twice and looks and maybe changes position to see if he can see the cow or bull that's calling, and he ends up walking off. Then you find one that's a little bit more eager, and he comes in and he gets to 20 yards and he's facing you. And the only shot you got is at the base of the throat, which is not a high percentage shot. It's a great shot if you make it, but I don't recommend taking it. And so we thought about it. We went, we don't have the money, so we've got a volunteer to go with us. We just pay for his plane ticket. So we did, and we had a caller now. We had a cameraman, a caller, and a shooter. And we began to figure that out. And the very first time we did it, we killed a great bull. And the bull never knew we were in the world, the camera or the shooter, because the caller was 100 yards behind us. And we began to add breaking sticks, raking trees with sticks, throwing rocks, kicking rocks, rolling rocks down hills, taking rocks and tapping them on the ground like elk running, we began to do all kind of things, but it's all about that collar behind you. So the greatest tactic that's evolved for us, and they say it's not bragging if you can do it, but I'll just say it. On the Truth series of elk videos, I think we're up to, which one are we up to? I can't even.
20.
I think it's
20.
Truth 20.
This is going to be this year. We're on 19 right now.
Yeah, Truth 20 we're working on now. But we have killed over 200 elk. I got to go add them up to be sure on video, and very low percentage of those are with rifle or muzzleloader. And it's all about the collar being behind us. And so we're buying, we pay for our hunts. If we access some public ground, the Vivadol, which I've hunted, which was a great one, a lifetime experience. That was a different kind of hunt. It was very difficult. The calling was very soft, and the elk came in silent. He came in checking it out, and it was a great hunt. But it's all about that collar being behind. And the elk, when they get to about 75 yards, they figure they should be able to see. And they should be able to see the elk that's calling. So the smart ones, they stand there until they see movement or they see what's going on. But when you're that far away, they'll come past you, and you got to be able to stop them with either your mouth or a mouth call. Another thing that we've done is that we've learned that the wind is the biggest betrayer. So you do your best, no matter how much that elk cuts around to one side, you keep the wind in your favor as much as you can. So little things like that add to our success rate.
Oh, absolutely. And those are great pieces of advice. And I know you're limited on time, so we'll wrap up with a few more quick questions. But, one of the things I really wanted to ask you is, at 62 and you killed a couple hundred bulls now with the whole Primos team, what is a successful hunt to you these days? And how has that evolved throughout your career?
Well, number one, Cody, you can go a little over if you want to.
Okay.
A successful hunt to me is being strong enough, my lungs, my heart, my stamina, my legs, to enjoy the experience. Because you can get in some pretty tough high elevation deals. We've hunted above timberline, over 11.5 in southern Colorado. Absolutely gorgeous being up there. For a hunt for me is to be healthy and to enjoy it, and to have the incredible presence of mind to know when to take a shot. And I've been very, very fortunate to make some great shots, and last year I made a bad shot. And what happened was, it was a younger bull. There was somebody going to hunt behind me. And so I had a little pressure on me. I wanted to, so this bull came in crazy on video, acting like a young teenager and doing his deal. And he got out there about 20 yards broadside. And I drew I was having shoulder problems. I wanted to make sure I could draw. So I drew, and my fingers not on the release. And I put the pin on him, and I said, I'm not going to shoot. And then I went, oh, heck, I'm going to shoot. I'm going to go ahead and kill him. And so because he stood there probably 20, 30 seconds, which is not the thing to do. If you commit and you're going to kill him, you kill him. And when I shot, he had made the decision that he was going to keep going forward to look for the elk that's calling, which is more than 100 yards on up in front of him. And so the arrow did not hit him behind the shoulder. And I was absolutely sick. That was a horrible hunt. I remember now a great hunt one time. One of the guys who owns the ranch in Montana that we hunt, he never had bow hunters before, and we taught him to bow hunt. We've caught up some great bulls for him and got a lot of fun with that. And so we're now on our fourth day of a 5-day hunt, and we have not been able to make it all come together. And my wife's calling behind me, supposed to call behind me, and we're creeping up this little small rise on the side of a mountain, which is going to get to a little flat, which is where we heard the elk bugling. And I get almost to the crest, and I see an ear, and it's a cow's ear, obviously. And so I stopped. So we never called or said a word. The cow was coming down the little small trail that we used to get up to the edge of that crest. And so the cow, right behind her, is this 370 bull. He's got short thirds, but he's a nice bull, wide, long, just got poor thirds. That don't matter. I think he's awesome. And so the cow boogers when she sees us and standing in the trail, doesn't know what we are. We got the wind right. And the bull turns broadside. He's about 15 yards. And at one motion, I pick up and draw when he takes off, and I try to stop him, and I don't stop him. He doesn't stop. He's too freaked out. And I was so excited. That hunt was so adrenaline-filled. There was nothing else on my mind at that moment. I wasn't thinking about what I had to do tomorrow, how much money I had borrowed, what I was going to have to do to make the company continue to stay on its feet, all of that. I was just thinking about that moment and enjoying it. I was just thinking about that moment and enjoying it. So we're walking back down the mountain, and we've now gotten into a little slight meadow that's going the face of the mountain, and we're going on down that side of the hill there. And the guy that owns the ranch, Frank, he walks up to me, and we're just glowing in the moment, having more fun, and we're just having a blast. And he goes, it's wonderful when you can see that somebody doesn't have to kill something to have this much fun. And that to me was I didn't get an elk that year, but that was great, and it was a great experience, and it was a great opportunity, not to try to shoot him while he was moving and try. It's all about making that perfect shot, and they don't go far when you make it right. When you make it wrong, it's sad stories.
There's a couple different things that interest me in that whole story, but one of them that you mentioned was making the right shot, and I think that's something that a lot of guys struggle with early is understanding when to shoot and when not to shoot, or even having the awareness of when to draw and when to not draw. What's your thoughts on that, and how has that kind of become something that's second nature to you?
Well, I don't think any of it's you have to time it, because if you don't have some object that the elk's going to walk behind to hide his eyes for you to draw when he's close in range, some people draw too early. And the elk stops, and then you get caught, and he's kind of not broadside yet. He's slightly quartering to you, which is not a good shot. And so you end up having to let the bow down, and they see you. And so, so slightly quartering away is good. So if there's nothing to hide, I'm going to wait till he's at least broadside before I try to draw. And I've got that mouth call in my mouth. And so many times on our videos and our TV show, you can see the elk see the movement and start the boat, then you go, yeah, yeah, and just do something nice and sweet that a cow would do. And he stops, looks back, well, that must be a cow, and you got the shot. But you've got to draw. If you're able to do it so that the elk doesn't see you draw, then you and the elk is still walking, then you have to stop him, and very lightly, either with your voice or with a mouth call, just stop him, and you've already got the pin behind the shoulder, and you shoot. We've got video of elk at 30 yards dropping 18 inches before the arrow gets there, but at the sound of a bow. And I don't care if it's a recurve or a longbow or a compound, any sound when they've already been alerted, they can drop. They're going to squat down to push off and run, and that's why they go down. They're not ducking the arrow. They're just using their body, their muscles to go down and push off just like you would if you were going to jump up and try to hit a basketball by jumping as high as you could. You've got to squat to jump. And elk have to do the same thing. And they lean over to push off. So, you're just going to have to learn. And a lot of people get behind a tree or behind a rock. Maybe on the side of the tree. I like to get in the front. And I like to stand. Because my knees will only give me about 10 minutes of being on my knees. They start talking to me enough that I need to get off of them. Will Walker, my friend who's hunted with us all these years, he gets on his knees. He's a little low profile, but just blending in next to a tree and not moving. And you got to remember, we got a cameraman right there too. So we've got two objects that can be moving and trying to get the elk's attention. So that's why the collar behind you is even more important for for videoing, but for hunting with a buddy system and somebody calling is even better because you don't have the camera to worry about. What was your other question, Cody? I said you had about shot, when to draw. Oh, when angle to shoot. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. As far as the angle on shooting on an elk, I've had one elk that I shot severely quartering away. Shot him behind the last rib, and I pick where it's going to come out, and which should have just gone all the way through and come out slightly in front of the offside shoulder, or headed in that direction. And I shot, and they're buried to the fletchings, and we never found that elk. I was sick. Nobody wants to wound an elk. And what we finally decided had happened, because if it had done what we thought it was going to do and it went to the fletchings, there's no way it didn't enter the vitals. The air is a long object. It's not traveling, but, depends on whether you're shooting a recurve or you're shooting a compound, 160 to 310 feet a second, which would be really fast for a hunting rig. But that arrow turned and went down the ribs and followed right inside the ribs. So it never entered the vitals. We never found that elk. Another elk that I did kill, we were calling, trying to get to him, and suddenly we realized that he's just right there. So we just had to use the terrain to sneak around a big, heavy tree and get the shot on him, and we did. And on camera, that's what's so great about on camera, because you can really study things and slow-mo it and see what you got. And I shot the elk, and the arrow turned after it hit him. So even though he didn't go but 100 yards and laid down, it did not go through the vitals like I wanted it to. It hit him right behind the shoulder, and I don't know why it turned, but it turned a little bit and didn't get both lungs. It got one lung and got the liver. So it was a very lethal hit, but it's just amazing what can happen. So I like to take broadside only shots and only slightly quartering away shots. And that's that. If you don't have that shot, relish in the moment. Have fun watching the animal. But if you don't, you got to program your head. This is where I'm going to shoot. This is my distance, and this is the angle. And if you don't get that, don't push it. Even if you're one trip of a lifetime, it's the last day. Because if you wound them, the heartache starts then. And not when you get to go back and say, man, I just didn't have the right shot, but boy, he was pretty. That memory can last in your life forever.
Yeah, those are two far different memories of a hunt, and no one likes to wound an animal, and that's just a heart-wrenching feeling, and then it just ruins an entire hunt, especially when you go home and you never find something like that. That can really put a damper on the entire experience.
It sure can.
What advice would you give your, 30 to 35-year-old self? Those early years of hunting, and you're still in the learning phase. If you could go back and give yourself some advice, what advice would you give yourself?
What advice would I give myself?
Yeah.
I would make sure that somebody is very proficient with his calls. If he wants to call, that he understands the wind, that he understands how valuable a wind checker can be. You can try to grab leaves and crumble them, and you can try to use dust, but white powder, checking the wind and watching the thermal. So pay attention to the wind. Understand a few things. If an elk's below you, he's more than likely not going to come to your calls. Why? Because he doesn't know what bull's above him or whatever, and that's the advantage, is being above and having all the weight and power to attack another elk. So an elk could be standing there hiding, he doesn't see him, he's climbing up, and all of a sudden a smaller elk has the advantage on him. If he does come to you when you're above him, he's probably going to circle and get even with you or slightly above you to come to you. So understanding that, don't waste your time calling to one that's below you. Try to get even with him or below him, and then he'll much, much more likely come to you. Take a buddy. That's the biggest thing I can tell you to do. Hunt in a buddy system. And I say do it this way. It lessens the chance for any error. Some people are not willing to make this sacrifice, But I will tell you this. In life, there are two pains: sacrifice and regret. And I would much, much rather go through the pain of sacrifice than I would the pain of regret. And by that, what I'm saying is two guys go, you decide, flip a coin, say you got 5 days to hunt, and say, okay, for 2.5 days, Joe's going to hunt. And Bob is not going to take a bow. He's going to be the caller. Because an elk can come in the back door and from the side. You're not perfectly sure if your buddy's moved or not, and you shoot the elk and you accidentally hurt your buddy, or it's just not. Enjoy the moment. And it's wonderful when you got somebody behind you calling and the elk's coming, and all of a sudden the caller behind you shuts up and he won't say anything. You're going, come and call, and he won't call. Well, probably because an elk's walked up on him and he doesn't want to call to booger the whole thing. But it becomes fun and you have adventure together. So after 2.5 days, if you hadn't killed, you switch up. Then if your buddy kills, then you go back to hunting. But your experience level will be heightened, no telling how much. And your chances of killing an elk will be increased by 1,000,000% if you're going to call elk.
No, that's great advice. I think a lot of guys in the elk woods understand that having a calling partner that can distract that elk away from you is so important.
Yes, it is.
So, Will, one last question for you. If you could have a billboard to promote hunting as a whole, and not just any product or anything, where would it be and what would it say?
It would say, and billboards, people who put too much information on a billboard, and you ride by in the car and you can't read it all, they miss the message. Those with one or two words or an image of something that gets your attention and says the message is the best billboard that can be made. So my answer to this couldn't be put on a billboard probably, so we'd have to work at condensing it down to make sense. But here's the deal. We're all consumers in this world that we live in, consumers of animal life and plant life. They sustain our lives by protein, nourishment, fiber, minerals, vitamins. And I was talking to a vegetarian once who, on an airplane, who was not liking me because I was a hunter. And, I said, the apartment you live in, the ground that you use to grow your vegetables or that somebody else does was cultivated and taken away from animals so that you could sustain your life. So we're all consumers, no matter how we choose to do it. Those that clear the land to plant the garden just took away the coon's home, the possum's home, the bird's home, and there's not as much wildlife because they have to have the right habitat to live. So hunting is a privilege, it's an honor, it's a tradition, and it's a love that many of us have, and we share in that moment, and we respect the animals. We want others to understand it and to respect it, but you've got many decisions to make, and if somebody hasn't read Aldo Leopold's Fan County Almanac, read it and understand how we are all consumers and we can all benefit the world and the habitat that animals call home, that they live in. But when we run through it and tear it up and don't honor it, we're doing a disservice to the world that we live in.
So true. And it's an interesting debate that keeps popping up in the hunting industry. And, it's something that I'll be curious to see how it goes in future years as we kind of progress. And it seems to be a big topic of conversation with veganism and vegetarians and things becoming more popular. And now this struggle to keep hunting around longer. And, I think it's a great route to help people understand that, hey, this is providing food. And I think we've done a good job of moving away from trophy hunting and getting people to understand that we are, providing a reusable substance for food. And I think that's a great route. I hope that's where the industry goes. And, I'm curious what your thoughts are on industry direction and where it should go.
Well, there's different factions within the industry every year, and it kind of ebbs and flows. As far as trophy hunting goes, if somebody is interested in a trophy and has the restraint and he passes up a lot of animals and doesn't kill anything, but that's going to be the meat for his table and his trophy that he wants, then good for him. Mm-hmm. If a guy wants to kill a legal younger critter, that's good for him. It doesn't matter to me whether you use a compound, a recurve, a longbow. I've built longbows. I've studied Saxton Pope and Art Young and Ishii, and I've read all I could about all of them. I studied the way Ishii made bows. I copied his longbow, and I loved making that bow. It stacked like crazy and was a horrible bow, but I made it, and it was wonderful to realize what these Indians had developed, the Yana Indians of California had made and what they'd done and how Saxton Pope and Art Young had done all this. So, there's so much to learn. There's so much to know about the world that we live in. The biggest problem that we've got is that there are people that are raised in the concrete and steel world of the urban society, and there are people that have never seen a cow, and that's the issue. I took my little nephews. I don't have children, so I took my little nephews. It's been 25 years ago, fishing one time, and so we're catching what we call brim. Some people call them perch, depending on part of the country they live in. And there was a big bluegill brim. And I said, would y'all like to clean these brim? We caught about 50 of them. They're gorgeous. And I said, we're going to clean them up and we can freeze them for the freezer later and we can eat some today. Yeah, let's do that. And so I started filleting the fish, and they were standing there watching me. And one of them said, is that where fish sandwich comes from at McDonald's? And these kids were raised in Mississippi, and they weren't exactly totally sheltered, but they didn't even know where a fish came from. Wow. And then one time I took my little niece, 9 years old, turkey hunting, and sat her in my lap and called up a turkey, and she shot that turkey with a 20 gauge perfectly in the head and neck. And I told her, I said, if you're lucky enough to get a shot, as soon as you shoot, I'm going to take the gun away from you, and you run to the turkey and put the instep of your boot on his neck and hold him down right there until he quits flopping. And she ran over there, and the turkey picked her up off the ground, and she had to get her foot back on him, and he quit flopping, and she looked down there, and she goes, are there turkey sandwiches in there? I said, do what? Turkey sandwiches for school. I said, yes, there are turkey sandwiches in there for school, and I'm going to show you all about it. But all she'd ever done was go to the grocery store and buy sliced turkey or a plucked turkey for Thanksgiving with her mother. So this is the world that we create by the world we live in. Unless we as hunters and people who understand it are willing to share in this world, the people won't have a chance to know.
Yeah, and I think the struggle is the people who don't understand are outpacing the people who do understand. And that's a difficult thing to manage, because now we have so many people that don't understand where fish sandwiches come from or where turkey sandwiches come from. So it makes an interesting campaign for the hunting industry.
Yeah, it's very sad, because I wish the laws were such that we voted and our vote counted by the area of landmass of the state we lived in. Because you got people in states like Wyoming and Nebraska and Colorado that get it. But Denver dictates to them whether they can trap or not. Mm-hmm. Oh, come on. Yeah. If you don't know something, you don't have any business voting on it. Yeah. If you haven't experienced it and you don't get it. Yeah. So,
and it's like Oregon. We have two cities that decide how we vote on wolves, and they wouldn't know the first thing about the wolves or the damage that they're causing to the cattle industry in the larger majority of the state. So yeah, it's interesting.
Or the outfitting industry. What about these guys who made a living, who love the woods, who love the mountains, who love the West, and they can't even run their dogs anymore for bears because the wolves kill them? Mm-hmm. I mean, come on. There's God gave us this world to live in and to enjoy. And the enthusiasm, the adrenaline, the passion, the love, the hard work is all done by those people who get what we get.
So if you were to be in charge of the campaign to save this, how would you go about that? And that's a really in-depth question, but I'm just curious, someone who's been in the industry, who understands the industry, how do we change this?
I don't know. I mean, think way outside the box and get some guy that's got 10 or $20 billion and let him put $1 billion into some kind of foundation that takes buses, 100 buses at a time, to go to New York City, to go to Denver, to go to Detroit, to go to San Francisco, to go to Los Angeles, and bus these people to the wilderness and teach them something. I mean, I don't know. That's a crazy thought, but I don't know unless you expose them to it. Unless something happens and the grid goes down and nobody can communicate and nobody can get electricity. It's those of us who know how to make it off the land that they're going to be running to.
Yeah.
But I don't know how because we're preaching to the choir here. People who are listening to this podcast, they're the choir. They're not the people we need to reach. And, there's some studies that I just read about people who were given the facts, that believed a certain way, and were given the facts through scientific research and history. And they were given this information in an effort to see if it would change their thought process. But they are so ideologic in their thought process, it grounded them more so in their thinking. So, when you get to that point and you can't talk to people and they won't listen, it's going to take them being in a life or death situation to appreciate the natural world, the world that we love going to and experiencing.
Well, was there any books in your childhood that kind of inspired that adventure or way of life? And do you think that maybe we're losing sight of that with some of the kids these days? I mean, growing up, I'm sure you read a lot of books about people who lived that life, and it kind of inspired you to investigate, so to speak. And I think that goes away these days. We don't have kids reading the books that inspire the true way of life, I guess.
And they don't know history either. And if those who don't study history and don't know history are bound to repeat it. And so God forbid that we repeat some of the history of the world that we've created and we live in. But for me, Kurt Gowdy was the guy on CBS that went hunting. And he came on Sunday afternoons at 3:00. And I was a little kid. Young, and I don't care what was going on. I was off my horse and in front of the TV. That was one of the shows I got to watch, and I'd watch that show because I wanted to see it. I can remember one. He took Peter Fonda on a caribou hunt, and I thought, well, how adventuresome that was. I read Fred Bear's adventures. Oh my gosh, what an incredible things that he got to do and to see and to be a part of. Saxton Pope, Art Young, their adventures, Howard Hill, all these were people who I just was drawn to that world of adventure and that world of a little bit of unknown and that world a little bit of I better know how to figure this out and take care of myself or I could not make it. Some people have that adventure, but not everybody can be a hunter. But the problem is those that speak out so much against it and don't understand it. And there are some hunters who have given us all bad names. My gosh, we've had a buttload of those.
Yeah, that's tough to compete with too. I mean, and it's hard because not everyone who uses a bank, some of them are bank robbers, and it's the same with hunting. We don't consider those hunters if they're poachers, but. They're the ones that kind of become the face of anything. Is the bad apple gets the most attention.
Well, there's no doubt that the most of the mainstream media is prejudiced against us, and they're going to use every opportunity they can to further their beliefs. And so, I love Fox because they'll talk about both sides, and the guys on Fox are hunters, and they get it. I love Andy Griffin. I like the earlier shows when Opie was young, but dadgummit, Andy goes skeet shooting and crow shooting. And if you look, I think they're Parker side-by-sides that are in the gun cabinet that are part of the arsenal for him and Barney to use to protect Mayberry. Holy crud. How great is that?
You don't see that anymore.
No, you don't.
Well, thank you so much, Will. It was great chatting with you, and I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, but we really appreciate you coming on and talking, chatting with us.
Thank you, Cody. It's been great. I wish you the best of success with this. Let me also say that protecting elk and the habitat that they live in, protecting their homes, is very important as this country continues to grow and the urban sprawl comes. We've got to have the corridors for elk that migrate. We've got to have places that they call home. Thank heavens, a lot of it is uninhabitable for human beings in the winter. Of course, the elk most times leave that and go down so that they can get to food. But I love the elk, and I love those that promote elk hunting. And you, bottom line, you protect what you love. You protect what you love. So teach people to love it, and they'll want to protect it.
That's so true, and it's great advice. You have any big hunts coming up this year, Will?
Oh, I'm going to Montana. I've been going there for, I think it'll be the 17th year, to the CA Ranch in Montana. It's a great place. We have the people are become close friends of mine and my wife. My wife does the calling, and everybody will say, "You call, Mary?" She goes, "Yeah." He says, "Well, how do you know how to do it?" She goes, "I know what the boys are thinking." So that's why she's so good at it. And then I'm going to go to New Mexico. So look forward to both of those trips.
Well, best of luck this year, Will, and hopefully it's a successful hunt in all the aspects.
I'm sure it will be. Even if I don't get anything, I'm going to leave there with a smile.
That's right. Well, thanks so much, Will, and appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you, Cody.
Hey guys, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show and maybe even picked up a few tips along the way. Join us right here every Thursday morning for more interviews and great hunting tips. And be sure to help us out by leaving a review on iTunes. For more information about this show and the rest of our guests, check out the show notes for links and additional resources on our website, www.therichoutdoors.net.